Hello there. This video is created primarily for Madfinger Studios regarding their new Grey Zone Warfare project. If you somehow ended up here watching this video, feel free to discuss it in the comments should you want it. I played around 100 hours in Grey Zone as of now, maybe a little less, got some opinions on different aspects of the game and really want to share this feedback with the devs. The game is really promising, I really enjoy playing it most of the time, and want this game to become great. Now, a bit about my gaming experience to give myself a little bit of credibility. I've played around 800 hours in Insurgency and Insurgency Sandstorm, both being realistic military shooters focused on intense, meat-based PvP experience unlike slow-paced Arma Squad or fast-paced Call of Duty or Battlefield. I've also played an unhealthy amount of hours in Hunt Showdown, the only properly designed extraction shooter on the market.
Know your fucking place, trash!
With that in mind, let me break down the Grey Zone based on my previous experience and my experience with this game in particular. I will be focusing mostly on negative aspects of the game, not to hate it, but to make the game better at earlier stages of development for these changes not to be painful or difficult to implement later. And I will ignore obvious issues that devs are familiar with, optimization issues, server issues, AI, as well as issues that are out of my expertise. Maybe. Let's start, finally. In games like that, be that survival, extraction shooter, battle royale, classic shooter, sound matters more than visual sometimes. When you can't see the enemy, you should be able to hear them to some extent, to have a proper situational awareness. That applies to movement, environment, and gunfights. It is also important to give the player control over the sound they make. Grey Zone has issues with all of that at this point, and while I understand that current audio system is most probably a placeholder, I still want to address the changes that are needed. After playing Hunt Showdown with well-executed sound system, I feel like I'm half-blind in Grey Zone. Footsteps can't be heard farther than 10 meters, gunshots are not super informative, the environment is too loud and not informative either. Let me break it down into multiple sections. While loud and constant sounds of nature are immersive and realistic, they take the situational control from the player because the player can't hear other players. Player can only hear birds and frogs almost constantly. Such environmental sounds should be made quieter and or zoned to certain areas. By doing that, the player will be able to focus on the other sounds surrounding him in attempts to hear footsteps, broken sticks, scared birds, etc. Who knows who else is out there? Speaking of which, sound trap system from Hunt Showdown would be a good addition to a dense environment through which players need to traverse. It is important, however, to make these sound traps evident for the player, giving him a way to avoid those sound traps and adjust actions to stay silent. Another elephant in the room is the indoor and outdoor zoning. As of now, there is almost no difference between indoor and outdoor sounds, except for quieter sounds of nature indoors. There should be a clear difference if the gunshot was made indoor or outdoor. If the floors in the building are thin enough, it should be possible to determine if the player is running below or above you. Also, so-called sound portal system from, I believe, The Last of Us is begging to be added. In short, there is a room with a doorway. The doorway is the only entrance that connects the room and an outer area where the player is. If the sound is made inside the room and the player is not in this room, not within the direct eye contact with the source of that sound, the source of this sound is shifted to the doorway that acts as a sound portal. And the only way to locate the actual source of the sound is to pass that sound portal and establish a direct contact with the source. With the environment being so densely filled with vegetation, players are often taking away their main way of controlling the environment and other players. We cannot see the enemy properly. And despite the "bro, I can't see shit" phrase is a common one for me and my Hunt Showdown buddies, This phrase is not much of a problem in Hunt because your ears become your second pair of eyes. The best and in fact the most reliable way to identify other players is by listening to the environment. I know I say this word a lot, Jesus Christ. Being able to hear enemies from afar, being able to understand where they are, how many of them there are, what are they doing on their run, where are they going to. You can obtain all these details by listening to what's going on around you. You don't even have to see the enemy. Additionally, in Hunt you can control the amount of sound you produce. Walking instead of sprinting since it is quieter. Crouching instead of walking since it is even more quieter. Controlling sound traps around you not to spook any crows. Avoid shooting. Avoid triggering AI because everything in this game is screaming, just to stay undetected. In Gray Zone for now, this level of audio depth just isn't there. Footsteps are way too quiet, they are not changing depending on your movement speed, running, walking slowly, crouching. The only consistent sound trap around you is vegetation and bushes which are making sound if you touch them. That is actually a very nice and important feature, I like it. That is simply not enough to orient and to understand where the enemies are, especially if the combat has shifted to the forest from the main compound. Combine that with the loud environment and the player not only can see the enemy, he also can't hear them. And it resulted in multiple occasions of me and other players not realizing that the enemy is within the 5-meter radius from each other, which is not really good. Additionally, gunshots are not very informative. In real life, gunshot sounds are rather boring because, well, the weapon-specific parts of the sound disappear at 25-30 meters and you can just hear the same bang no matter if it is an AK, an AR or anything of the same caliber. And it is good to have very similar weapon sounds in the game in terms of realism. When guns have different sounds while having the same barrel length and the same caliber, it's not very logical and gives away too much information at the same time. However, it is sometimes hard to determine if you are being shot at or somebody is shooting elsewhere, especially because of the supersonic snap. It is a loud sound and I am glad that it is in the game. But due to the nature of the sound, you will hear it only if the bullet flies near you. That's a sign that somebody is shooting at you specifically. And while the gunshots and its echo should be loud and should be heard on a very large distances, which it isn't now, there should be a clear audio indicator that these shots are towards you. I fucking hate it! I'm sorry about it, but I just couldn't pick a better wording for this one. As of now, progression is fully logged behind the quests from vendors, and these quests are not necessarily entertaining to say the least. While the first reconnaissance visits to new locations are indeed interesting because, well, you don't know the area, you don't know the landscape, you don't know where the bots spawn, where the enemy players are camping you, we'll get to that. But visiting the fourth narrate for 7th time to collect 4 items that are completely identical to the environment and to find which the only way is to pixel hunt every single desk in the office hoping to find an interactable object is boring. And at the same time you have to keep in mind the hordes of AI that are trying to kill you. I mean, the story about the congressman losing their phone on a fucked up resort is funny, but searching for this phone without being able to call it is not. Had this been interesting, I wouldn't be mad if I lost my phone in my own apartment searching for it for the last 10 minutes. Where the fuck is it? In other words, if players are saying, okay, let me Google where this thing is in the middle of the raid, it means that the quests are not entertaining and are rather boring for players. A bigger problem here, however, is the fact that PvP becomes rather rudimentary. We will get to that. Your PvP skills, your ability to hide, to shoot real players, to spot other players doesn't really matter for the game. The only benefit you get from killing a player is that you can get his fancy gun, so you don't have to buy a new gun into the next raid. As a result, it is better to play the game passively, avoid and evade the enemy most of the time, or simply switch to the PvE mode for progression because the quests are frustrating enough. And having an additional irritational factor of other players is kind of too much. I'm personally the kind of gamer who prefers having access to all the in-game items from the start and progressing as a player, getting better at the game itself, not getting better at grinding these goddamn levels of vendors to finally unlock a decent optic. Worst part of that is PvP is not giving you any reward for being successful at it. You're not getting any significant money, you're not getting any progression from vendors by killing other players. Even selling other players guns and gear is not profitable because you can't sell plate carriers, guns are sold at ridiculously cheap rates. There is no reason to engage PvP and being aggressive at it, because winning it gives the player low rewards while losing it leads to the gear loss, which is a frustrating element. It is way too punishing and non-rewarding to be worth risking at the first place. The way I see it is the game needs to have a designated PvP mode that allows to unleash the clear PvP experience, where the players are allowed and are rewarded for being aggressive, where the players are engaged and rewarded for taking their fanciest guns and coolest gear to the raid. I wrote an entire topic in Discord, which nobody has seen because there are just too many suggestions at this point. You can pause it and read through it. A fine addition to PvP in any form would be a dog tag system, one of a few things Tarkov managed to do properly. You kill a player, you grab his dog tag if you can, you sell it to a vendor, you get money, XP and reputation boost for all vendors. And now... what you see is a big PvP experience of Grey Zone warfare, unfortunately. Because of the issues from the previous topics which are layered on one another, PvP in this game is rather inconsistent and even somewhat unfair. Players are not really interested in having an honest PvP on normal locations, they are not motivated and interested at being aggressive. And to be fair, they don't have enough tools to be aggressive. Vegetation is too dense, environment is too loud, sounds are too quiet. As a result, we have an experience of players choosing the most passive and efficient tactic possible. Ambushes, LZ camping, bush camping. Because if you move, you die. If you don't move, you remain unseen, undetected and unheard. I suppose this is not the way devs expected players to be playing this game, but it is a common issue of players playing the game not the way the devs wanted them to. Players will choose the least demanding and most efficient way to play the game, no matter how lame that is, will call it meta and will stick to it, telling everybody else to get good and touch grass. Thus, it is needed to counter this and make other playstyles more rewarding. Reward aggressive gigachads that are pushing and playing CQB aggressively. Make proper PvP more profitable and more engaging. Give players more tools to control the environment and other players, and you will have a great game that finally brought something new to the genre of extraction, realistic military shooters.